Hello, my name is Sylvia Bruce and I'm a performance with wellbeing coach, mental health in the workplace coach and consultant and integrative counsellor. And I've been asked today to come and do a vlog, which is one of those new things for me, but it's about mental health. And I was asked to actually do top 5 tips. Now I did actually wonder top 5 tips of what, but then I got thinking it's my top 5 tips, and you've probably seen so many things and articles and on the internet and papers and everything. But these are my top 5 tips. They're my personal tips, my personal insights and my personal experiences for things that I do now, things that I have done, and things that I would do differently if I knew what I knew now. So, my first top tip is to be honest with yourself. Now that might sound quite obvious, but I know that I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't like to admit that something was wrong. And the next thing was to actually admit that I needed that something was wrong, and then also to ask myself those questions: what do I need, what do I want, and what would I like to have happen? If I'd paid attention to those things years ago, then perhaps things may not have deteriorated as they did. So I think that's the thing, is to be honest with yourself. Admit to yourself that something's not quite right, and then think about what you could do about them. Okay, my second top tip is being aware of your personal clues and cues. And that's not easy to say, but the point being is, if we are aware of ourselves, what we will call our non-verbal communications, those behaviour, psychological, physiological changes that we are aware in ourselves, those times when we feel something's not quite right, those times when we get a bit short-tempered or get a bit irritable, they're non-verbal communications, and that's exactly what they are, non-verbal communications. They are telling us something. So it's up to us to listen and pay attention to what our body is trying to tell us. And if we don't listen to our bodies, and if we ignore what the message is, things can deteriorate quite rapidly. For example, in my own self, I used to suffer a lot from headaches. I just thought everyone had headaches. I didn't realise it was an indicator of stress, tension, pressure perhaps. I carried my tension in my neck and my shoulders. Then later on they developed into migraines, and I still didn't pay attention to the signs. And at a later stage they even thought I had a brain tumour because I had so many headaches and migraines. But it turned out to be stress and tension headaches. So my point is, something that can seem quite a bit of a pain in the backside, I would imagine, can actually be an indicator of something that's going on inside ourselves. So that's the other thing, to pay attention. And what it does is send us a message. And what it helps us do, and it's something I forgot to mention in the first one, what it does do, it helps us to think about what's going on and moves us from a position of perhaps being stuck to actually doing something positive about what's going on for us. Other things, like in my own case, I used to feel as if the blood was coursing through my veins at 100 miles an hour, as if I was galloping just to keep still, or even just to keep up. Feelings of frustration and irritability, and I have this, and I still have a very bad habit of finger picking. But for me, it's an indicator of when things aren't going quite so well. So that's a pointer for me to listen to myself and pay attention and do something about it. Okay, so my third top tip may sound a bit of a strange one, but it's your 5-minute gift. By that I mean, in everyday life we often hear those phrases, oh, give me 5, give me a breather, oh, I need time to think, oh, I need some space, oh, I need to step away from that, oh, I need to step back from that. But they are also telling us something. They are actually telling us, I need a break, I need 5 minutes, give me a breather. And that's what I mean by the 5-minute break. It's those switching off moments. And I'm not talking here about switching off social media, phones, Facebook, Twitter, and all that stuff. What I'm talking about here is switching off from what's going on around you. Finding those moments when you're so focused on what you're doing that you can park, put to one side, whatever phraseology you wish to use for that. Those moments where you can just put those things to one side and just focus on something that's good for you. And it's to do with resilience, I guess. It's those little moments when we can recharge, reinvigorate, refresh, renew, reinvent, all those R words. But that's what we can do. And I'm not talking either, because some of you might be thinking, oh my goodness, I'm just far too busy, I can't factor anything else into my life. What we're talking about here is doing a little bit more of what you already do. And by that I mean, for instance, if you're waiting in the coffee queue and you're getting frustrated it's taking a long time, perhaps think of it as this is 5 minutes to myself that I could have. 5 minutes I can catch up on my social media or talk to a friend or something. And when you're on your way to get your sandwich, rather than thinking about that document to check or that payment to do or that article to write, think about what you're going to eat. What is it going to taste like? What is it going to smell like? The colours. And even do that when you're eating or drinking. Because what you'll find is for those few moments while you're focusing on something else, you've switched off, you've parked all that other stuff and given you a breather, a bit of a breathing space. For me, what I used to do when I used to have a drink or go to the facilities, washing your hands, for example. Feel the water on your hands, feel the soap around your fingers, feel the dryer on your hands. When I get back to my desk, I used to use hand cream. For those 5 minutes when you're working the hand cream into your hands, it's pushing all that stuff to one side and then, okay, let's step back in. Those little things that anyone can do, and it's all part of what we do on a day-to-day anyway. It's just using what you've already got in a slightly different way to get more out of it. Okay, so the fourth top tip is watch your language, which in a way follows on from the tip beforehand about paying attention to your language, need a breather, need a break, doing something differently. And what this is be careful when you start using words like should, ought, must have to, and one of my prime ones is got to. When I start talking, like, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, that is one of my biggest triggers to my own self. Because I haven't got to do anything. And that's something I have to remember. I haven't got to do anything at all. So the difference would be there to bring in words like choose to, would like to, want to, and need to. And just paying attention to the wording that we have when we use self-talk. And also following on for that is the tone and the pitch of our own self-talk. When it becomes that softly encouraging and gently pushing ourselves on to do something. When it tips into that harsh, driven, quite challenging and quite overdriven language. That can be very, very limiting. The second one is to change cope to manage. Now this, a lot of people might find this a little bit odd, because if you actually look up the dictionary definition of cope, it says something like dealing with successfully, or I forget how it phrased it, but for me, the sound of it and the connotations seems to have a slightly positive negative. It comes across as almost struggling, just about managing. Whereas if we use the word manage, and even you hear in the tone of my voice there, cope versus manage, there's a more uplifting, there's a more positive, it becomes a more positive. And it brings back a sense of control versus cope to versus manage. And the other one is to remember we have choice. Sometimes I think a lot of people think, oh, I don't have choice. And we think about choice, we don't have choice. But what, in my personal experience and with working with others is that quite often that's because we're focusing on the consequence of that choice rather than the choice itself. And that's one of the biggest pieces of learning that I had, was that sometimes we do not have choice what happens to us, but we do have choice how we manage it. So those are my 4 top tips. And my final top tip is that if all those things to keep your well-being and keep yourself safe, look after yourself and take care of yourself, if you do start to feel that you need a little bit of help, if you admit to yourself that you need help, if you read those changes in yourself that you realise you need a little bit of TLC, if you're watching for that language, and if you, all those little switching off moments, and you do realise that you do need a bit of help, it's the obvious. It's seek help and talk to someone. It's not necessarily talk to someone. These days, there is so much help out there, online, articles, information. You don't have to talk, but do something. Please do something. Suffering in silence doesn't serve anyone at all. There's that Marianne Williamson's poem, Our Deepest Fear, and in it there's a phrase, your playing small does not serve the world. And here I just have a light twist on that one, is that your keeping silent doesn't serve you at all. It didn't serve me very well, and I wish I had spoken sooner. I really do wish I'd spoken sooner. Keeping silent had an impact on me that it deteriorated so badly that I ended up in a very, very dark place, and that really wasn't necessary. So please talk, please seek help, and at the end of the day, who suffers if you don't? Who's the one that suffers if you don't do something and try to help yourself, or seek help, or do something different? And I'll just leave you with one thing. We cannot change other people, but we can only change ourselves. Thank you for listening.